I will now invite the appellant forward at this time to address the board. The appellant should come to the podium to receive the oaths issued by the clerk.
Please raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
Chris Devine, 759 Center Street, Herndon, Virginia, 20170.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give to the Board of Zoning Appeals will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for your time and service. Mr. Hendrick, welcome. It appears you're coming out of the gate with an interesting first case. I would like to restate that this is about a correct application of the zoning ordinance section to the observed activity. Further, I believe that in order to have correctly cited this violation, two things needed to have occurred from the town. One is they need to have possessed a thorough and accurate understanding of the observed activity. And secondly, using the zoning ordinance, they must have applied a confident and robust use definition to that activity in order to cite the violation. I think the question here, the decision, is whether or not the violation was correctly cited. So those are the two points that I'm certainly looking for. The first, in terms of the house concert activity being familiar enough to cite the violation. During the informational meeting on the 17th of December, prior to my decision to appeal, I did meet with the town's zoning administrator and inspector, and in that meeting, I confirmed the town was unfamiliar with house concerts. To the staff's knowledge, a similar activity had never been cited in the town, nor was it familiar personally to either of them. I also began to understand the potential confusion that led to the mischaracterization of the activity. I've delivered a package of exhibits to each of you. If you turn to Exhibit 1, it is really sort of a single page, what is a house concert? I took this from a website called Concerts in Your Home, which has been around since 2006. This is sort of the go-to resource for those hosts and artists that are putting on house concerts. It's sort of a guide advocacy group, if you will, and they have a very simple definition here. There are some bullets underneath. I'll read the first part and let you just peruse the bullets. The first part, simply put, a house concert is a music performance in someone's home, presented by a host who does not profit from the event. Traditionally, artists are paid by a suggested donation requested of each attendee, and they've listed a nominal $10 to $20 as a typical range. And again, I will give you some time to peruse the rest of the bullets there before I proceed. The other thing I've added at the bottom is a simple analogy that's often called into use by house concert hosts and concerts in your home. And that analogy is a pay-per-view event in a residence where if you have a sports fan in your neighborhood who is the biggest sports fan and they have the nicest TV, they might gather their friends and neighbors together and other invited guests to pay for and watch a championship boxing match on a Saturday night. Maybe it's $100, $200, and they collect money to sort of offset the cost of that, so it normalizes the cost per person. That is, by the way, an example of my definition of an indoor entertainment use, potentially, per your earlier question. There are other analogies, and I'll get into those a little bit later, but that's one that's most commonly cited by folks like me that are doing house concerts to describe something might be unfamiliar to others. So let me talk a little bit about how I got into house concerts, if I may. I was in the winter of 2015, early winter. I attended a performance at the Barns of Wolf Trap, and the opening act was a 23-year-old guitarist from Australia named Daniel Champagne. He was opening for Paula Cole that night in front of 400 people in the venue, and his performance was stunning. I talked to him on intermission, and I spent the next 2 weeks trying to explain to my friends how amazing this guitarist was, and it occurred to me that I could have him in my house via one of these house concerts. That was my first go at it, and it took me about 6 months to arrange that. And in the summer of 2015, I invited about 20 friends over, and we witnessed an amazing performance by this artist. The most common comment from the audience, my guests, after the performance was they were stunned at what a high quality performance we could see in the intimacy of someone's home, the engagement with the artist. It was truly a connective experience for them. And they were also happy that they were able to somehow contribute to the artist's well-being by making direct donations to him so he could continue to make this music. That was how I first started. I was so moved by the experience, I decided to do it more. In fact, it became more than a hobby. It was a pretty intense passion of mine, and I've been doing it, as the report said, since 2015. I also realized, again, by reading the staff report and looking at the exhibits, one of the main points of misunderstanding was the website. And as I got further into my passion, I decided to develop the website. These days, it doesn't really take that much effort to put a pretty good website out there, so I did. And I did that for a very specific set of reasons. One was when you have multiple events, I needed something that acted more like a customized Evite, helping me track those guests and friends who had decided to attend one of the events, and I wanted to do that in an automated way. The website made that very, very simple. That's why one of the reasons I put it up. The second comes to the donations. I view the website as a virtual tip jar. I started my shows with putting a tip jar in the front, and that was a bit inconvenient for the artist. It was inconvenient for some of the guests, and this allowed people to make an advance donation, not have to worry about it, do it cashless, and then I would caretake that for the artist. And then on the night of their performance, settle up with them, and everything was good. I think along the way, I mentioned putting a website together, and when you do that, you assemble different widgets, and some of those widgets have terminology sort of as part of their boilerplate. So the widget that I used to accept those donations had ticket on it instead of donation. I would have had to heavily customize that. So that's how I believe how the perception started to creep into this very nice looking website. It uses the term ticket, general admission, because they were boilerplate in the web application that I had used. As the staff report indicates, yes, I have since modified that, and I realized as I went through what was happening here with this violation that was unnecessary confusion that was causing an understandable confusion. So I have spent the last number of weeks remediating that website to remove that confusion. I don't want anyone in the community to misunderstand what I'm doing. I think we heard something about the words professional house concert. I do have an about page which describes that this is indeed a house concert where 100% of the donations go to the artist. The only word that professional appears, to my knowledge, given it's my website, is when I describe the quality of the sound system that I use to give my listeners and the artist the best possible experience. I never refer to the operation, if you will, as professional, for the record. I would like to go to the staff report. I believe you have that as an exhibit. Appreciate that. I'd like to start with the case summary section in the staff report. The October 30th, 2018 complaint, yes, that was the first complaint that I have ever received after doing these for 3 years. The complaint cited or alleged 75 individuals attending events. I've also left an Exhibit 3 with you to look at, if you would, please. That is the sort of a rough diagram of my living room. It measures approximately 15 feet by 23 feet and comfortably seats about 40 guests. So the complaint in that regard is clearly inaccurate, and I just wanted to clarify that. Next, in the case summary, the enforcement staff reviewed the website, and I think we've had a good discussion there. On the ticket price general admission, yes, that's what it said at the time. And again, I've remediated that to make sure that confusion doesn't persist. Probably the most interesting part of this is the next section. The applicant's website listed Crib Music Enterprise, LLC. And as you heard earlier, that was in the copyright marking. Maybe you didn't. That was in the copyright marking of the website. I want to explain a little bit about how that LLC came to be, because I totally recognize that could be a major part of the confusion when we talk about commercial. When I've been doing these house concerts for about 1.5 years, the passion continued to grow, and I made a major life decision at the end of 2017, and that life decision was to explore creating an actual commercial music venue in Northern Virginia. This is an actual commercial brick-and-mortar venue. And in order to do that, I established an LLC to guide the process of locating real estate and just all the things that you would need to start a business. I always maintained the sanctity of the house concert in my residence per the per the bullet points that you saw and the definition of a house concert. I never changed what I was doing there as I started exploring the idea of making a livelihood from this in a real commercial venture somewhere. So back to the website. When the website was being put together, it's fairly common practice to copyright the pages of the website because you're technically developing content. And so I looked around and in a moment of very fast decision with no idea of the unintended consequences that I think we're talking about tonight, I used the LLC thinking that it would give me a stronger, more enforceable copyright. It just honestly just looked better. Unintended consequences notwithstanding. That's the other reason that, yes, according to the staff report, I have indeed gone and removed that copyright marking. It's simply not worth the confusion that it's caused. So that is now off of the website. And that is the explanation for Crib Music LLC existing at all. I'd next like to move to the staff comments section further down in the report. This is the 4 bullets that lead in. Zoning staff contends that a house concert is not an accessory use to a residential property for the following reasons. This really is in many ways the heart of the report. The original, the complete violation also cites the indoor entertainment use, and if you trace far enough through the zoning ordinance, you will find the word commercial within the definition of indoor entertainment use. And if you go further to the definitions in the back, you will find not a definition for indoor entertainment use. You will actually find a definition for commercial indoor entertainment use. So I would refer you to those if you haven't seen them. But in looking at these 4 reasons, remember, they are the heart of the violation. So taken individually or even collectively, the question is, do they describe this commercial use? And more specifically, can these reasons be found in the ordinance as it pertains to the cited use of commercial indoor entertainment? So I'll just start with the first one. The first one says attendance is open to the general public by purchasing tickets online through the applicant's website. We've discussed the website issue and the purchasing tickets. I won't revisit that, but I do want to talk about this notion of open to the general public. I am certainly free as a homeowner to invite into my home anyone that I choose, including those fellow music lovers that want to support the artist through a donation. While I have not had the occasion, I can also refuse anyone access to my home at any time for any reason. And again, I haven't had to do that, and that's an important notion. I can refuse access to anyone at any time for any reason. Therefore, attendance to my home is not open to the general public. Number 2, attendees are providing money for the purpose of viewing a live music performance. Whether a profit is generated is not relevant. Again, returning to the earlier analogy of the pay-per-view sporting event that you might hold on a Saturday night with your friends, certainly there are attendees providing money. Another example might be if you are a foodie, you might go out and hire a professional chef for an evening and have a gourmet meal prepared for you and your friends. You may decide also to defray that cost. Similar concept, so move the chef to the side, put a songwriter with an acoustic guitar there, and you essentially got the same thing. I would certainly submit that either of those 2 analogies are not commercial activities. I don't know the complete relevance of citing profit generation here. We've talked about the 100% donation-based, and I think there was a question earlier about profit being part of the commercial definition, and I was not able to find that in the zoning ordinance. Even so, again, for the record, these are 100% donations that go to the artists. Number 3, in that sequence of bullets, even if attendees are refused entry or ejected from the venue, they will be dispersed directly into a residential neighborhood. Yeah, not to be flip, but clearly anyone who exits a residence for any reason will be dispersed into a residential neighborhood. But this reason doesn't even attempt to speak to a commercial definition or a question. It really starts to get to the nuisance question that came up earlier. And the violation is not citing a nuisance violation. It is it is strictly zoning. But because it's in the report, I did want to respond to it. Exhibit 2 in the staff report that we saw earlier does show the picture of the residence, and you can see where I sit. I would submit that even if my guests do exit my home all at once, they certainly wouldn't provide a problem to the residential neighborhood. I really border the commercial district and the arts district as well. So I also have 2 letters in the back of the packets that I submitted from 2 of my nearest neighbors, one of whom actually shares a wall with me, given that I'm in a townhouse. And those 2 letters both very strongly speak to the lack of any sort of nuisance issue. So I encourage you to review that. The last of the 4 bullets, applicant hosted 23 live entertainment events in 2018. Absolutely accurate. It's a fact. But again, we're asking a very specific question. How is the number or frequency of occurrences related to the determination as a commercial use? Clearly, there's no definition in the zoning ordinance. There's no number, and that's from a practical standpoint. But it begs the question, would this reason still be cited if the number was 2 events or 5 or 10 or 15? So again, I don't see how that makes a case for this activity being of a commercial nature. With that, I've cited I've gone through the 4 reasons at the heart of the report, and I believe I've addressed them all. So I'd like to summarize with a few thoughts. First, I'd like to return to the only relevant question for the appeal. Was the zoning administrator correct in deciding that the observed house concert events are an indoor entertainment use and not a permitted use on the subject property? That's the language from the violation. And again, to have correctly cited the violation, the town must have done both of the following 2 things: possessed a thorough and accurate understanding of the observed activity, and using the zoning ordinance, they must have applied a confident and robust use definition to that activity. I believe I've shown that the town did not have all of the information to understand house concerts as an activity. Along the way, I've also acknowledged how a cursory review of the activity may have resulted in confusion, and I've since taken steps to remediate that. When a town resident is declared guilty of an offense, it can set off a serious and impactful chain of events. That's what happened here. So if the town has the authority to unilaterally cite a violation and they know the activity is unfamiliar to them, the town has the responsibility to perform a thorough investigation prior to citing the violation. That investigation might even include a conversation with the citizen when necessary. That's really the error here. On the zoning ordinance, because this activity is unusual, is unique, the ordinance understandably lacks a strong matching use definition, but relying solely on the most compatible use doesn't meet the requirement to apply the ordinance with rigor. So the basis of the town's decision is contained in the 4 reasons in the staff report, and I've discussed each one of those in the context of my house concerts. And I've demonstrated that they do not support the zoning administrator's decision. I respectfully request that the board reverse that decision. And again, I thank you, members of the board, very much for your time and your service. That
Thank you.
concludes my remarks.
Is there any question for the appellant from the board?
Go on. Mr. Devine, you mentioned 2017 that you decided, with the success and the enjoyment that you were getting out of it to cross over and make this a profession. Is there any crossover between the events that you have with the entertainment and?
No. In fact, I'm very early still, unfortunately, in the process of looking to open the actual commercial venue, so there's no crossover there. Inspiration only is what I say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question?
Yeah, can a person obtain a ticket to an event without making a donation?
Yes. In fact, in the there's an info email as well, and if for whatever reason the guest wants to attend and they talk to me about that through email or other means, they're welcome to do so. In fact, we have a loose partnership with Herndon High, and I was the treasurer of the Guitar Boosters Association for 2 years, and we've had many guitarists that come through. So we have a standing agreement that if any student wants to attend and they're unable to afford it, I work with the artist and get the go-ahead, and we allow them to attend without any donation at all. And it doesn't have to be in advance. Yeah.
And then on the website, too, is there a way to change the amount of donation before a person who's for lack of a better term, purchasing a ticket, is there an ability on the website for them to change?
No,
the
right
donation?
now, I have the ability to set by artist a suggested donation amount. I can change that, but once I set that suggested amount for an artist, you can't select it from the website. However, again, if that's an issue for anyone, there's an email that they can send and said, I for whatever reason, am unable to or unwilling to make the suggested donation. That's always, that course is always there. And I would add further, Mr. Hedrick, that that's really, again, a function of the template. When I picked my web, it had put the number here and click the number up and down, and you get quantity instead of changing the number. So.
Okay. And you mentioned the sanctity between the LLC and then this event venue. Does any money that comes in through that website pass through an account or anything associated with?
I have a checking account dedicated to the house concert that only handles the donations that come in.
Okay.
Yeah, those are completely isolated from anything else.
And does the LLC, do funds from the LLC provide any sort of gear, promotional funding, or anything like that?
No, no. The artist gets 100% of the donations that come in, and I take out of Hyde the food and beverage and things that aren't brought by the guests.
Any further question?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Devine, thanks for the presentation. We certainly appreciate that. Has there historically in this enterprise been a limit to the number of tickets that you, I'm going to use the word sell, okay?
That's fair enough. Fair
Number
enough.
of tickets you would sell over the website.
Yeah, I mean, it's limited by my capacity. Again, referring back to the diagram, I can only really hold about 40 guests. And so when the other thing that the website allows me to do is it allows me to set that number. And so if I exceed that number, I have the ability to email the people and say, I'm sorry, there's no space. Would you accept standing room or something like that? So it is fundamentally limited by the capacity of my living room.
Okay. Let me get on to the topic of home concerts. I believe that's how you refer to them as house concert. My own personal feeling, I think, although I'll certainly be listening to the comments that go on during the rest of the evening, there is nothing about house concerts, I don't think, in the zoning ordinance.
Correct.
So if you're referring to these as house concerts, which means in terms of the zoning ordinance, I fully understand how you feel about them, but in terms of the zoning ordinance, they are pretty much undefined. Okay? I don't think it means it would be appropriate, since they're undefined, but since some people think they're good, that they're okayed by the zoning ordinance. I think typically in that situation, the appropriate process might be to amend the zoning ordinance. That might be the place to start. I'm not sure. Again, I will be listening as the evening goes on to the various comments from yourself, anyone on your staff, and various citizens. But it's the town, the people that write the zoning ordinance, the wishes of the people of the town of Herndon as expressed through their elected representatives. That's what decides what is in the zoning ordinance and where we want to go with it. I appreciate your passion, and I share it to some degree, to a large degree.
That's good.
But I got to deal with the zoning ordinance.
Absolutely. Yeah, and again, I would welcome the opportunity to have that discussion. It hasn't happened yet. Going back to, my experience here was being cited with insufficient, what I believe is insufficient information. That's really, and I've confined my comments this evening to that specific question by definition, but I'm certainly open to resolving this in any number of ways.
Are you done, Mr. Donahue? Okay. Any further question? I have a question. So anyone who comes upon your website who's a music lover and decide they want to come to your concert, so they can, someone that you don't know, just someone who happened to come on your website, wants to come to your concert, Is that possible?
Yeah, rarely happens. They can, let me walk you through the process. They can, there's a form that you fill out that says, how did you hear about us, before you move to the advanced donation page. So they can select I was referred, or I know the artist, or a number of reasons there. So I get all those things that come in. Once they make the donation, I now see their name, their address, their email, their phone number, and if they have a comment that they've added. If for some reason I don't know who it is, I suspect there might be something going on, they didn't fill out the form correctly, I can email them, and if I don't get a satisfactory answer, I can just unilaterally refund their donation. So that is a way to prevent anyone that I don't want to come into my home to come into my home. That's really the first two lines of defense.
So before the date of your cited violation, you've been actively screening?
I do.
The,
I review every donation that comes in.
Okay.
There aren't at the end of the day, there aren't that many, so it's not unmanageable for me to do that.
Okay. My next question is, have you thought about parking for the people that, so how do you instruct, what are your instructions for the guests that?
Mr. Chairman, what I do there is about a week prior to each of the events, anyone who is on my guest list, I have their email address. I send them a detailed email. It does a couple of things. One of the things it does is it gives them a specific address. It gives them my phone number. It gives them a 15% discount to the Mediterranean Breeze. Thanks, Phil. Appreciate that, man. And I suggest that there are walkable restaurants in the area. I give them guidance that said there's plenty of general public parking. In fact, I point to the public lot across the street diagonally from my house on Center Street and say there's a large public lot. That's the place I'd recommend you park. And again, the letters, 3.5 years, 40 plus shows, the letters in the back for my neighbors, there's not been an issue until October of 2018, apparently.
Obviously, somebody complained.
Yeah, I think
the zoning,
the same person 3 times. But
okay.
If we were to have that discussion, Mr. Chairman, I would comment that I believe the complaints in that regard were groundless. I think someone saw something they didn't understand and said, I don't think that person should be doing that. Let me raise the flag. I have never had a complaint on parking or noise in all this time.
Thank you. Does the town attorney have any question for that part?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll call comment from the audience.